What up everyone, Big Kev back in the building. Today we have another one from Fat Electrician. This one's called The Most Gangster Politician Ever, Cassius Marcellus Clay. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's check it out.
It's a riveting story. It's really good. Alright, we gotta go. I gotta tell the internet about the guy I named you after, okay? You gotta go hang out with mom now. Today we're talking about the most gangster.
You know, it's got to be a pretty good story if he's naming his kid after the person.
Gangster politician in American history, ladies and gentlemen, Cassius Marcellus Clay, aka the Lion of Whitehall. Whitehall being his family home that he grew up in Kentucky as the son of one of the richest slave owners in all of America. While going to college at Yale to become a lawyer, he would attend a speech from a famous abolitionist by the name of William Lloyd Garrison, and that speech would change the entire trajectory of Cassius Clay's life as well as American history. It is at that moment that Cassius Clay decided he was not only going to be quietly opposed to slavery, but that he was actively going to fight against it. He would be set down the path to become the most influential abolitionist of all time. I forgot to mention, Muhammad Ali's original name was Cassius Clay. Yeah, he was actually named after this guy too. Anyways, back to the video. Bye-bye. If you don't know, at this point in time, there's basically two different camps you could fall into for being anti-slavery. You could be an abolitionist or an emancipationist. An emancipationist is somebody that wants to vote it out over time, over the next 5, 10, 20 years, versus an abolitionist, which is somebody that believes we need to end slavery right now, and they're willing to fight about it. And in the case of Cassius Clay, he was willing to fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. You see, Cassius Clay wasn't just some nobody punk kid that went off to college and decided that he didn't like slavery. This was the son of one of the wealthiest slave owners in all of America. So for him to come out and voice anti-slavery views was a huge deal, and it pissed off a lot of people. So, being that this was the 1820s, what do you do when you're pissed off? You challenge somebody to a duel. So needless to say, the young Cassius Clay found himself partaking in an awful lot of duels, and he never, ever lost. So, obviously he's pretty good at it, and what do you do when you find something you're pretty good at? You want to keep doing it, right? Right. So Cassius Clay starts challenging anyone and everyone to a duel that dares to oppose him. It became common knowledge in his community that Cassius Clay would be willing to fight the wind if it blew from the west and he wanted it to blow from the east. This man went on a dueling rampage, so much so that by the time he graduated college, he was considered to be the deadliest duelist in all of North America.
That's pretty crazy to have that designation.
This guy was putting slave owners in the dirt like he was Johnny Appleseed planting fucking trees. He became known as the deadliest abolitionist of all time. So he graduates from college, goes back home as a lawyer. Shortly after that, his father passes away and leaves everything to Cassius Clay. Cassius Clay immediately frees all of his father's slaves, costing himself $40,000, which is roughly $2 million today. And then
that's a lot of money.
he even gives some of the slaves land and money on top of it, absolutely infuriating the pro-slavery people in Kentucky. So, what do you do when half the local population hates your guts? You run for public office, and that's exactly what Cassius Clay did. He served in the Kentucky State Legislature from 1835 to 1841, and then finally lost his re-election, to which the pro-slavery crowd breathed a huge sigh of relief because they finally defeated Cassius Clay, or so they thought. Clay immediately starts traveling the country, giving amazing anti-slavery speeches, winning over hearts and minds, and this absolutely infuriates the pro-slavery people because they don't know how to stop him. You can't legally stop a guy from talking to people that want to listen to him, and they can't legally kill Cassius Clay in a duel because he's the best duelist on earth. What do you do?
Yeah, they tried to do that and everyone keeps losing.
You've got to illegally kill him. The problem with that is they can't find a hitman that's dumb enough to think that they can take out Cassius Clay, so they have to go to the one crevice of the planet where they can find somebody truly insane enough to think that they can do this job. And that man's name was Sam Brown, an assassin from New Orleans. 1834, Russell Cave, Kentucky. Cassius Clay's finishing up one of his world-famous speeches as he pulls out a burlap sack, reaches into the sack and pulls out a holy Bible and says, "For those of you that believe in the laws of God, I make to you this argument against slavery," sets the Bible on the table, reaches back in the sack, pulls out a copy of the U.S. Constitution, and says, "For those of you that believe in the laws of man, I present to you this argument against slavery," sets the Constitution down on the table, drops a burlap sack to the ground and says, "For those of you that believe in neither the laws of God or man, I make to you this argument against slavery," as he pulls out both of his pistols and sets them on the table, which I think we can all agree is gangster as fuck. And at this moment,
yeah, that's pretty gangster.
Sam Brown comes up on stage and shoots Cassius Clay point blank in the chest. Luckily, Cassius Clay never leaves home without his trusted Bowie knife, which resides inside of a metal sheath. And that metal sheath would catch Sam Brown's bullet, saving Cassius Clay's life. At which point, Cassius Clay would draw his Bowie knife and charge Sam Brown. 6 of Sam Brown's friends in the audience tried to stop Cassius Clay. He would fight his way through all 6 of them, making his way to Sam Brown, promptly stabbing him in the chest, and then turning him into a Mr. Potato Head by cutting off his nose, lopping chopping off his ear and gouging out one of his eyes.
Oh my God, that's a crazy story. That's insane. First of all, for you to be lucky enough for that Bowie knife sheath to actually catch the bullet, then to immediately take out your Bowie knife, fight off 6 people, then get to the assassin, and then not only beat the assassin, but cut off his nose, ear, gouge out an eye. I can't believe I've never heard of anything about this before. It's crazy.
And the 6 men recovered and were able to peel Clay off of him. Not knowing what to do, knowing they couldn't stop Cassius Clay forever, they panicked, probably for fear that Cassius Clay was going to start shoving this guy's facial features up his ass next. They did the only thing they could come up with to get the two apart. They picked up their friend Sam Brown, threw him over a 7-foot-high stone wall. He fell down an embankment and into a creek bed to finally get Cassius Clay away from him. Somehow, Sam Brown survived, but not only was he lucky for that, he was also dumb as fuck because he then decided to take Cassius Clay to court because apparently after Cassius Clay stabbed him the first time, they were even on the whole assassination attempt thing.
Is that how that works?
So Cassius Clay should go to prison for mayhem. So Cassius Clay calls upon his older cousin, one of the best lawyers on the planet that had never lost in open court with over 40 years of experience, Henry Clay. Henry Clay goes into court and his entire defense for his cousin is, and I quote, "Your Honor, this is just standard behavior for a Kentuckian." And the judge is just like, "You're innocent. Free to go. That's it."
That was the defense. I mean, it feels like Cassius had a really good self-defense claim, but it's just normal behavior was the whole defense. People from Kentucky just do this. You gotta love the evolution of the law over the years. That's a wild defense to stake your life on.
Best court case ever literally walks in and just goes,
"I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America? I'm sorry, I thought this was America."
So after Cassius Clay was found innocent, Henry Clay decides that he's going to run for president, and Cassius is going to help him campaign. Cassius is going to tour the country, giving speeches, saying, hey, vote for my cousin. Here's the rule with that. Henry Clay told him he's only allowed to tour the northern states because he's actually legitimately concerned that if he sends Cassius to the south, he's going to shoot so many fucking slave owners in duels that it could be considered voter fraud. So Henry Clay ends up losing the president.
Wow, to be concerned about voter fraud because you murdered so many slave owners legally. That's a weird thing to have to consider before sending someone out to do speeches. If they don't go well, he's probably going to win a crazy amount of duels, murder so many people that his opponents can turn it around and say that by murdering all these people, he's committing fraud.
Election, and Cassius moves on to his next life adventure, which is becoming an author and writing anti-slavery news articles. The problem with that was none of the newspapers were willing to publish him, so he says, fuck you, I'll start my own newspaper, The True American. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, starting an anti-slavery newspaper in fucking Kentucky in 1845 was not very popular, and his business would receive death threats pretty much every day, some of which were written in blood. So Cassius Clay, in true Cassius Clay fashion, says, fuck it, I guess we're gonna fight about it. He then proceeds to up-armor his entire business and his printing office. He covers the entire front of the office in a large iron sheet. He installs several cannons down corridors, stocks the entire thing with loaded guns, and rigs it to explode. Here's the thing,
That's your workplace? Imagine if someone did that in their workplace environment today. That's insane. That's awesome. I cannot believe I've never heard any of these stories before. I don't know what they taught when I was in school, because I feel like if our teachers had taught us some of these stories, I know I would be, and I'm sure all my classmates at the time would have been a lot more interested and a lot more attentive, throughout class. Because these kind of stories can't help but get you invested in what was going on. I mean, they definitely left out some of the more interesting tales from our history.
Also doesn't expect his employees to fight to the death for him, so he installs an escape hatch and instructs them to escape if anything goes down, because he's going to fight the entire mob by himself.
That's nice of him.
How's he gonna do that? As soon as you walk in the only door to get into that printing office, you find yourself in a long, narrow corridor with iron on each side, just wide enough for a single man to get through.
That's smart. A little kill box.
Cassius Clay is going to stand in that narrow corridor and fight the entire mob one man at a time. Literally the mentality of, if you have a problem, take a number, I'll kill you in a minute. This man recreated the entire battle of fucking Thermopylae with 300 Spartans, except he's going to do it all by himself. If you think fucking with John Wick's dog is a bad idea, the last thing you want to do is fuck with Cassius Clay's printing press, because this man is determined to defend the freedom of speech with the right to bear arms at any cost. Obviously, this escalates to Cassius Clay defeating an entire mob single-handedly. Right? Wrong. The mob, being full of, super brave pro-slavery men that know they're doing the right thing, do the honorable brave thing and wait till Cassius Clay is bedridden with typhoid fever so they know he isn't going to show up. They show up to his business at night and burn the place to the ground because they're a bunch of fucking bitches. Now, Cassius Clay recovers from typhoid fever. He reestablishes a newspaper in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is an anti-slavery stronghold. The only problem with that is being an anti-slavery stronghold, there's not going to be any conflict, and that's fucking boring, so Cassius Clay moves on to another life adventure, volunteering in the Mexican-American War. While serving in the Mexican-American War, he would be a captain leading a group of Kentucky soldiers, and they would be captured pretty much immediately, and he would spend the duration of the entire war as a POW. While serving as a POW, some of the men under his command would escape, meaning that the Mexican military was then going to put the rest of his unit to death. Cassius Clay said, hey, don't kill my men, just kill me and my other fellow officers. We're the ones in charge. It's our fault that those men escaped. It's our responsibility. Please let the lower enlisted men go home. The Mexican military was so impressed by this that they decided to spare everyone, including Cassius Clay, and he would return home a war hero.
That's wild. A, to have the balls to do that, and then for it to actually work out in your favor. Feels like a story ripped right from a movie.
Returning home from the war in 1848, he didn't really know what to do, so he starts giving his famous speeches again, this time leveraging his newfound title as a war hero. So obviously it doesn't take long for him to piss everybody off. He faces yet another assassination attempt. This time 6 brothers from a wealthy slave-owning family show up, the Turner brothers. They show up with clubs and knives and guns, and they beat the living shit out of Cassius Clay with the clubs. They stabbed him multiple times. Cassius Clay whips out his trusted Bowie knife, starts opening up these brothers like they're fucking Amazon packages, making his way to the lead brother and stabbing him an excessive amount of times. We don't know how many times, but we do know it was a lifetime supply. Killing the lead brother, ending the assassination attempt, Cassius Clay would fall to the ground, nearly dead, and this would be the closest anybody ever came to actually killing Cassius Clay. When he was asked about it later on in life, all he said was, I felt the utmost indignation, which translates to, I was fucking annoyed. This man almost died from an assassination attempt, and he has the same attitude towards it that I have towards fucking fruit fly.
Yeah, right? I know, the most they could get out of him was annoyance.
It's okay. This dude is so metal, he deserves his own spot on the periodic table of elements. Cassius Clay then makes a full recovery from his injuries, starts giving his speeches again. 1853, he donates a large chunk of his land to John Fee, who uses it to found Berea College, the first co-educational and multiracial college in the South ever. Fast forward to 1860, Cassius Clay is giving speeches in Illinois where he meets a politician by the name of Abraham Lincoln, and they get along great. Cassius Clay is then slotted to become Abraham Lincoln's vice president. However, he's a little bit too Cassius Clay to be an actual big-name politician like that, so they give the job to Hannibal Hamlin, and Cassius Clay becomes the ambassador to Russia. 1861 rolls around, the Civil War breaks out, Cassius Clay is in Russia. Cassius Clay not only convinces Russia to not side with the Confederates, but he convinces Russia to tell Great Britain and France that if they so much as recognize the Confederacy, Russia will go to war with them.
You think something big like that would be more well known of a story. I mean, that's huge, not getting other countries to side with the Confederacy, especially with them saying we'll go to war with you if you side with them. I mean, that's a pretty big step, and for the ambassador to convince them of that, pretty notable.
And this was a humongous step that nobody talks about in the winning of the Civil War. And it is 100% because of Cassius Clay. Fast forward to 1862, Abraham Lincoln wants to appoint Clay a major general in the Union Army. Cassius Clay publicly refuses the President of the United States, saying that he's not going to do it until the President signs the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves of the South. Cassius Clay is literally the man that bullied Abraham Lincoln into prematurely signing the Emancipation Proclamation before he wanted to. And nobody talks about it. Fast forward again to 1860.
Yeah, I'd be curious for anyone in the comments below, did your history class teach this? Did you guys know about Cassius Clay? Maybe it was just my school that wasn't teaching this, but I don't remember seeing any documentaries or any movies or reading any stories about him before. Even when I would read about Muhammad Ali, I don't really remember, and obviously his name was Cassius Clay, I don't really remember ever hearing that he was named after someone, let alone this person, with this crazy background.
55, the Union wins the Great American Scrimmage, the slaves are freed. Cassius Clay has achieved his lifelong goal at the age of 55, bringing an end to slavery in the United States of America. He then goes back to Russia again to serve as ambassador until 1869, and while he is there, he helps to broker the purchase of Alaska. This man is probably the most influential person in American history that you've never heard of. After returning
And he helped get Alaska? This video is nuts. I'm pretty shocked by all of this.
home from Russia, Cassius Clay would live out the rest of his days in Whitehall until the age of 80 years old, where he would be declared clinically insane, in hindsight most likely due to a severe amount of PTSD, as well as potentially dementia.
That sounds like a fitting end to the story. I mean, just the way this was going, you figured something would have to catch up with him. I mean, his whole life was crazy. Why wouldn't he go crazy in the end?
He didn't die from it. He lived on for quite a bit longer. He just picked up a new hobby of fucking with the local sheriff because he was crazy now. Over the course of the next decade, Clay and the sheriff would have multiple run-ins that would be concluded when the sheriff and 7 deputies were repelled from Whitehall when Clay utilized his home defense cannon that he had at the top of his stairwell. At that point, the local sheriff would inform the local judge he will not be returning to Whitehall to tangle with Cassius Clay anymore unless the judge was willing to dispatch an entire company of the local militia to accommodate.
I mean, how old was he at this point? I mean, even at this advanced age, they still weren't able to deal with him.
Then in 1900, 2 men would break into Whitehall, and Cassius Clay at the age of 89 would manage to kill both of them, one by gunshot and one yet again with his trusted Bowie knife. Then in 1903, at the age of 92, Cassius Clay would die of natural causes, or as they called it back then, general exhaustion, which is the most gangster way on the planet to go out.
General exhaustion? I mean, the dude did lead an incredibly full life. If there's anyone who deserves to live to a ripe old age and die of general exhaustion, it's this dude. I mean, it's crazy that at 89, he was able to repel two attackers and kill them both. I mean, you'd think at some point with all the duels and assassination attempts and, getting captured and being a POW and back then traveling internationally, you think something would have caught up with him. You thought he would have gotten killed off in some other fashion, for, him to actually see through his goal of helping to end slavery and, then living for another, 40 years basically, just as wild as the rest of his life is, honestly.
Literally just, I'm tired now, peace, and then he left.
I'm pretty tired. Think I'll go home now.
In conclusion, when it comes to famous historical household names, there's always another man or woman lurking behind the scenes in the shadows that's deemed too rough around the edges to be in the spotlight, yet they contribute just as much, if not more, to the movement. These men and women are willing to do horrific things for terrific reasons, and when it came to Abraham Lincoln and the abolition of slavery, that man's name was Cassius Marcellus Clay, the most gangster politician in American history. Thanks for watching the video. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
Yeah, I mean, that was another excellent video from the Fat Electrician. I mean, I'm a big fan. I mean, humorous as always, and just these great little pieces of history that just go under the radar, especially for such an important time in history that is covered to death. I mean, everyone knows about Abraham Lincoln and, the Civil War. I mean, that's one of the most widely covered eras of American history, and yet still this huge part of it I had no idea about. Yeah, so I'm really pleased that I checked this one out. I'll definitely be continuing on with his videos going forward. If anyone has any suggestions of ones that I should check out first, be sure to let me down in the comments below. Until next time, have a good one.